Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
What are the chances you get a face itch right as you press record? I'm like, hi, welcome. It's so weird. It's like it couldn't happen just a split second before or later on. It had to happen right at that moment.
Of course not. And there's no way for me to edit this. So, it's just going to stay in.
Trust me, I got fine with it a long time ago with my big ass face in the camera. What else am I going to do? I mean, look at these cheeks. They're so huge.
They're cherubic.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe you just said that.
Why?
Is that how you say that word?
Cherubic? Like
cherubic?
A cherub? Like like an angel, like a baby angel? That's what they are. They're baby angels, I guess.
Right. Yeah, no, they totally are.
Okay.
Have I ever told you that story about that review I got where the guy said that Paul James's chubby cherubic countenance goes through all the emotions so you can understand the character fully. And it was a total compliment. And I was like...
And alliteration.
Right. Oh, yeah, I just realized that. I don't think I'm quoting it exactly right, but I think that's... And so I was reading it and I was like, chubby cherubic. What's a cherub? And I was like, a little angel with wings. And I said, Dad, what do you think he's saying? He's calling you fat. And I was like...
Oh, no.
And he was like, I'm kidding. He's like, no. And I was like... He was like, you do kind of have like a thing going on there. And I was like, yeah. And that's when I was like super thin and super like, not that I'm overweight now, but I'm just saying my face, if it's just my face in a shot, it's big. He's calling you fat. I was well, on that note,
can your cherubic cheeks talk about challengers then?
Yes. It's a very challenging movie.
Yes. No, I'm glad that. So here's the first thing I'll say.
Make that joke all week long.
Here's the first thing I'll say is that I'm glad that Challengers actually is tied into tennis because I don't really know much about tennis, but like that is a thing, a Challenger. So like that like the tournament that this whole thing is centered around in New Rochelle, New York, just off the beaten path type of thing. So that I liked, and I guess that they did spend enough time to try to make it plug in to tennis, although I'm sure there's a bunch of like tennis heads out there that are like, this couldn't happen and that couldn't happen, and but I didn't get into that. I was more looking at it from, just coming at it top-down movie standpoint. First thing I'll bring up, Justin Kuritzkis is the husband of Celine Song and is also a playwright. This is his first screenplay. So I was like, man, that's pretty cool. That this is his like first foray, and that he got Luca Guadagnino to make his film. So that's pretty awesome too. So were you excited about this coming out? I think we talked about it and that it got pushed from last year. I'm excited for Luca Guadagnino films because I know that there's a particular level of quality and a particular level of like he's all in with his movies, whether it's Suspiria or Call Me by Your Name. And actually, there's one that I haven't seen, A Bigger Splash. Have you seen that?
No.
Okay, I do want to see it, especially now that slight tangent. I've been watching Criterion 24/7. So on the Criterion channel, what they've done is they've made, how HBO was like HBO and whatever's on HBO was HBO and it was just on and you watched it. And then they did like HBO streaming and you can watch whatever HBO movies. Well, Criterion is now doing essentially a cable channel that is Criterion movies. So I turned it on one day and it was a movie called La Piscine, which is a Jacques Deray film, has Alain Delon. And he was in Le Samurai, and it's the Luca Guadagnino movie I haven't seen, A Bigger Splash, is essentially a remake of La Piscine. So that got Luca Guadagnino on the brain, and then I just saw Challengers this weekend too. I like Zendaya. We just saw Zendaya. Is it Zendaya?
It's so hard pressed for me to ever correct anybody with their pronunciation, but I think it's Zendaya.
You're right. It's Zendaya.
I think so. Zendaya is what you and Justin were calling her during Dune.
I like Zendaya, and we did just talk about her in Dune. And she also produced this movie, which I thought was interesting. So she's got a little bit more behind it than just her acting. So how'd you like it?
I had a strange non-interest in this film. Like it just didn't call me. I don't know why. I love Luca Guadagnino. I love Zendaya. I love Michael Feist. I mean, it was all about him with West Side Story, and I've seen The Crown, and I've seen Romeo and Juliet that Josh O'Connor I always forget his name. Is it
O'Connor.
O'Connor, right? Yes. Um, so yes, Josh O'Connor. So I like all of those actors, but I was like, oh, sports movie, tennis movie, love triangle. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. Okay, what's this? What's going on? And the first thing that I noticed immediately is that it's a character study, it's a love story, and then it's a tennis movie. It's not a traditional sports movie by any sense of the imagination. It is, but it isn't. The ending proves that it's not a sports movie because usually there's an underdog. It's always an underdog, and neither of them really are underdogs, although Patrick has become the underdog. But without him kind of scraping by in the beginning of the film, you wouldn't understand many things and many choices that he makes later on in the film. You have to have that. And that two are successful. It's a complex film about interpersonal relationships that I'm not fully understanding, and I'm not fully engaged in why certain things happen in this film. But I was glad it wasn't even though Rocky is the underdog and doesn't win. Sorry, spoiler alert. It still is a feel good stand up and cheer at the end of the movie, even though Rocky, if you take yourself out of the knowledge of Rocky and the history of Rocky, it's an independent film that could have played in an art house back in the 70s and never get noticed because it's that small of a film. It's just become the epic thing that it's become. But it's really a small independent film. It really is. Rocky is really a small film, but it's still a feel-good film at the end. It still makes you want to stand up and cheer when the last shot or the last basketball goes in the hoop or the last football goes over the field goal, whatever it may be, or the last person does a touchdown and they just barely skirt by that orange cone the
pylon.
Yeah, pylon. Thank you. I wouldn't have gotten that if you paid me. You could have given me multiple choice and I wouldn't have understood what the hell that was. But now that you say it, I know it. So I was intrigued. What does the screenwriter want from us? Why are we watching this movie? What am I learning about myself? Not that that's a requirement, but that's how I gauge things. And I'm not sure in the end it's clear, but I kind of like that. I kind of like the uncertainty of not knowing and the perplexing questions that I ask about what happens in the middle of the film that never really get answered. And I've given myself over to the fact that sometimes, and I'm being facetious, but I'm also being for real, you have to let art flow over you and just let it affect you while you're actually in the process of watching it, looking at it, hearing it, seeing it, whatever it may be. And so I have just got to a place where I'm like, okay, the acting is superb in this film. They are three of the most charismatic people on film, and they're in the same shot a lot of the times. They're young and they're really handsome and just good looking, and even when they sweat, they look good. I mean, and that's a thing in the film. It's kind of what opens and ends this movie is a sweat shot. Basically, or sweat beads. Basically,
that's Lynn's choice, and that's just there's a lot going into that. Those close-up lenses and all that water, sweat, whatever coming off of them. It's a
and
I
like and I like the fact that when the sweat hits the camera, it keeps going and it kind of blurs the shot. Usually it's like almost a mistake that happens, but the director keeps it in anyway. This was purposeful. So I don't know if this is the type of film you can go, I love this. Oh, I didn't like it. I don't think I'm one extreme or the other. I have some questions, but overall I was engaged and the film kept me watching it. The whole entire time. I did not get pulled away for anything. Not a look down, nothing.
I think the editing really has a lot to do with that and the choice of the structure of the film. But for me, this movie, it kind of hits me in where a lot of we've done our like top 10 favorite movies, each of us. And like a lot of my movies in that list have Obsession as the number one focus of the film, and this is another one but the weird part about this movie is that it's more like Tashi Duncan, the Zendaya character's obsession with tennis, and the two other characters, Art and Patrick, like their obsession with not necessarily each other specifically, but their obsession with needing a particular relationship. So, and how they live based on where they're at in that journey. And so the two movies that really popped up for me, one of them was Whiplash, and you kind of see the drive that Miles Teller's character has, and then Tashi Duncan's character, and then also There Will Be Blood, both of which are in my top 10 movies of all time, where I see Tashi Duncan as a Daniel Plainview, really, because she's solely focused on her obsession with tennis, and however that manifests pretty early on in the movie, she breaks her, something crazy happens to her knee. I don't know. It's probably more than an ACL injury. It's probably something a lot more severe, but to where she can't really compete going forward. And so she's essentially like coaching who becomes her husband. Art coaches him to great success, but then also like her foot's always on the gas, and he wants to kind of like back away by the end of the movie. But that's not acceptable from her, because like her number one priority, it seems like, is good tennis. That's
interesting. I saw it completely different. I saw her obsession was with control. She needs to control the game. She needs to control her image. She needs to control Mike. She needs to control our Art. She needs to control Patrick. And that's, in my opinion, evident in the makeout scene. Because why is all of a sudden she's making out and then she steps back and she is very satisfied, and I don't think it's in a sexual way that they're making out, and she is nothing
she
to do
made
with
that
it.
happen.
She controlled it, and
Okay.
she made it happen. Regardless, and there's homoerotic overtones throughout this whole entire movie,
yeah.
which are some of my biggest questions. And we'll get there. But when she sits back satisfied that she was able to facilitate, possibly where it's kind of not defined clearly if they've ever hooked up. They sort of explain some things that happen, but the language that they use is very interesting, and I'll digress for a second and then I'll come back. So when they're outside at the beach, and she says, "I'm not a homewrecker," and they say, one of them, I think Art says, "This is an open relationship," but he has a girlfriend, and I'm like, wait, whose open relationship is this? Wait, is that a joke? Is that kind of like them not downplaying, or them like if they, oh no, we're not gay, and that comes across as homophobic. So they're just playing it for what it is versus, but it's not defined well.
I took it as a homewrecker means like homewrecker would specifically be like a woman breaking up on or whatever, a person breaking up a marriage by inserting themselves in. But
sure.
So then homewrecker would be, she's saying homewrecker as in like they have a relationship. If she inserts herself into that relationship, is that going to break them up? That would be.
Totally. I got that. Their relationship is not defined. Have they hooked up? They don't seem like they have, but are they maybe interested in a throuple? Maybe. And if they're in a throuple, it's a three-way couple, which actually is. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not, it's actually kind of an oxymoron, because you can't have a couple, because isn't a couple two people? Yeah. And so a throuple is three in a couple. So I know three people actually, who are in a throuple, and I've worked with them as a throuple. Wow. In a play. Anyway, which was, whoa. It was so fascinating, and it wasn't the titillating stuff or the things. But
it's like one person does the laundry, and another person does the groceries, and another person like mows the lawn. Like, I guess I'm just trying to figure out.
Such a sweet man that's the most innocent thing that you came up with when your mind could go 1,000 different directions. You're like, who does the laundry?
No, I'm just not built. I'm just not built for the throuple thing. So
neither am I. Neither am I.
I just don't think that. Yeah, no, I don't know.
No, not in a prudish kind of judgmental way, just in a life and sexuality, and people are so complex, and that there are people who exist. So it was one man and two women. He was married to one of them, and then the other one came along, and they became their lovers. So they always referred to each other as "they're this." they're going to this afterwards. Hey, do you want to go to lunch with us?
All three of us.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And it's strange how quickly you get used to things that, but like when you see one get kissed hello, hey, how was your day? And then the other one comes in with snacks. Oh, I got you some Doritos and Coke. I know that you were doing this and you were doing that. And I know that you wouldn't be able to get to the store. Hey, how are you today? And you're like, wait, you just said hello to her. Now you're saying hello to her. Okay. And it's not anything sexual for me. It's the fascination of how complex humans really are and how people's needs are different than mine, and that's fine. Back to the movie.
Okay.
They're not technically in a throuple because they're not.
They haven't agreed to it. Yes.
And they're not. They never really do. Okay. So the movie has a tennis forward theme, but I really don't think the movie's about tennis. I really think the movie's about control and how everybody is trying to keep control of whatever their situation is. Now, a lot of people have let go of their control and let another person control them. Art allowing Zendaya, because she says, okay, fine. We don't have to play tennis, but we can just be millionaires and sit around and do nothing, And the connotation is the reason why we are millionaires is because I pushed you down the tennis road the way that you've pushed, and I've been pushed down the tennis road and I've pushed myself, and now we're millionaires. Because why are the young daughters why are those scenes in the movie? Sports films have a tendency to lean on the actual sport, obviously, and that the conflict comes from, a lot of the times, a personal conflict with your own self in the sport, how much better you can do, whether or not you're the underdog and whether or not you can rise above. We had a sports podcast years ago, and I talked about Vision Quest. By the way, I got kind of joked by my friends about that being one of my favorite sports films. But I was like, the point to that film for me was that your endurance and your willpower is as strong as anybody else that you're competing against. Even though the guy looks like a brick house and can carry a log up a staircase in a stadium, your willpower and your endurance and your own mind over matter is as important as any kind of physical being you can be. And so sometimes sports movies lean into that. This one, in my opinion, has a tendency to lean into what's more interesting about the interpersonal relationships or what's going on in the soul of the person, not necessarily the game and how that defines them. Because once she's injured, the game can no longer define her as the best or the most incredible or going to go pro soon, all that other stuff. And I love, and maybe it's because Zendaya is the producer, and I'm always a little unclear what producers do, how much say they have. I know that they gather the different teams together and stuff like that, but I don't know how much a producer has in the structure of the screenplay. And I'm sure that it was probably there, but the fact that they're confused that she doesn't want to go pro immediately and wants to go to college, and she says, I want to know something other than a racket and a ball. I want to know myself other than what I'm capable with on the tennis court. I want to know things. I want to know, there are books I want to read. And they make her a much more well-rounded character by stating that, because it's no longer about defining yourself through being one of the greatest possible tennis players ever. So I think the movie leans way more into the interpersonal relationships and the complexities of that than actually how the game defines a person. It's a long way around, but
I think for me, like, it seems like the only time when she's alive in the only time when she's alive in the film is when she's either on the tennis court and interacting in that way, or analyzing tennis or tennis adjacent things, or close to the end where when she sees them finally play against each other. So I think that it to me that was the thing that I got away from it. In the same way that Whiplash is not about jazz drumming specifically, it's about obsession. It's about someone pushing someone else, whether that's good for them or not. You can make the argument that her relationship with art isn't necessarily always good for art, but but because of and then it's also maybe that whole scene where she's like we're getting into real spoilers now. So, spoiler time, spoiler time for challengers.
Did you just say spoiler town?
Spoiler. I tried to say spoiler time, but then it didn't go well.
Okay, so we have to when I do a spoiler before we say spoiler, we'll call it spoiler town. Okay?
It's spoiler town.
Paul did a spoiler town again. He went to spoiler town. Okay,
we've driven right into spoiler town. So when they're on the bed and she's like, and he says, I want to retire after, whether I win the U.S. Open or not. And she says, well, if you don't win the U.S. Open, then I'm going to leave you. She does say one little line in there where she's like, that's what you wanted me to say, right? Like essentially kind of like recognizing or showing him or telling him that like, the reason why you've gotten as far as you've gotten is because I've pushed you this hard. And so there's that kind of, symbiotic relationship of like, she's getting something out of this by being, I wouldn't say parasitically, but by being adjacent. Yeah. And by being adjacent to his success, which he's had a lot of success, by being adjacent to his success, she's gotten something out of that. And then, he's gotten something out of it because he may not have been, as self-motivating as he would need to be, and he was able to actualize his potential in tennis with her help, whereas the exact opposite has happened with the other character, the Patrick character. So he has not had her by his side, and he has decided to just kind of, well, not decided, he has languished and his talent has gotten him to a certain point, but he hasn't gotten any further. So, and then he kind of goes to her close to the end and says like, hey, I think if you coached me, I would actually be really, now I don't know what, like, is his motivation to be with her? I don't know. I mean, or is his motivation to get better at tennis? Or does he feel like dangling his tennis potential in front of her would be enough to attract her away from art? I don't know. You're right. There's a lot of questions that now either that's a poorly written script, which it could be, or it's opening up the film for exploring the characters in different ways and from different angles to determine like what each of the characters' motivations are and why they make the decisions that they make throughout the film. So that to me is a more engaging way of going about a movie than just kind of like you hit the ball, you catch the ball, you throw the ball.
Underdog rises above, jumps over net at the end of the game, wins. I just remembered something I was going to bring up a few seconds ago, and I kind of digressed into something and then went back. We were talking about control, to go back to that really quick. The scenes with the daughter, why are they there? I kept going, why are they here? Why are they here? Because it's the only part that it's the only part of Tashi's life she doesn't fully control. If at all. She relinquishes most of the care to the grandmother, which makes logical sense. Well, her mother, the grandmother of the daughter, which makes logical sense because she's over there doing a whole bunch of other things. She's on her computer. She's watching TV. She's on the phone. She's calling so-and-so. She's getting this set up, that set up. So she's doing the business side. So she's at work. So, her kid essentially is in daycare. The daycare happens to be her mother, happens to be the grandmother. But then later on, when they just, it's kind of early in the film, but it's mentioned 2 times where they decide to just stay at the hotel because the young girl likes hotels. The daughter likes hotels. And then later on, she says, my daughter likes hotels. Because Patrick's like, why haven't you gotten a house? And why haven't you moved into a more solid place? Or why aren't you at the Ritz or wherever he says that you're supposed to be? And she says, because my daughter, Lily, I think that's her name, likes hotels. Well, why is she so not good at giving up control over Art's life and his tennis career and her marketing career, if you will, but yet she's so willing to just be like, okay, sure, daughter, you can have whatever you want. I relinquish control completely. We'll stay at this hotel because that's what you want. I think it's to not counteract, but to show the different sides of Tashi, that in the tennis world and in the art controlling world, this is how she is, but she loves her daughter in a different way mother-daughter way, I guess, that she doesn't need to control the daughter or what happens with the daughters. Because why isn't she like, okay, well, mom, at such and such, she has to learn her English, and such, she has to go outside and play, and she has a play date with this person, and she has
she's
soccer
got tennis
at this
practice.
and she's got this tennis practice. When are we going to start her? She's not too young. Why isn't she like that with the daughter? And she's not like that with the daughter at all. As a matter of fact, the most easygoing whole persona in her body is so different when she's engaged with the daughter and scenes with the daughter. Even just looking in to see that the husband is in bed with the daughter, she wasn't there. She was out hanging out with Patrick in the storm. And, the father just kind of like maybe told the daughter a story and they fell asleep together. And it's a nice, innocent little, green stars are floating around in the sky and in the room. And it's really a nice kind of family moment. Why are those in the film? It's got to be to show the juxtaposition of who she is as this controlling other figure. Let me state for the record, I want to state this. I'm not saying controlling is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that she's a bad person because she controls things. Somebody has to steer the boat. Somebody has to take the reins of this corporation that they run. Mm-hmm. I like that she has that control. I'm not making a statement about that she's controlling and it's a bad thing per se. I just find it interesting when she is and when she isn't controlling.
I have a more cynical view of that.
Of course you do.
I don't know if she's necessarily as interested in her daughter as she is in tennis.
I thought that too, but there's just something about the way that that's written that's different. She's not in the room with the laptop on and the TV on, and she's not like, handle it. She doesn't do that. She shuts everything down and starts to engage in the daughter's activity, whatever it may be, getting her ready or whatever.
Yeah, so I don't know. The grandma's always around though, and also like she could totally be using her daughter as an excuse. Oh, she likes hotels, But I don't know if Tashi wants to be tied down to a house, which means they're not out doing tournaments, and they're not out going to Australia for the Australian Open, and they're not out going to Europe for all the stuff out there. And I mean, like the more you move, the more you go, the more you're in the industry, in the tennis sport, So them getting a house and settling down, it doesn't seem like she's necessarily that interested in that.
But why write the daughter in? If that's all it is, then why write her in? First of all, that's an overused trope. I mean, we see that all the time. The unattended child in the situation because the person is focused on other things. It doesn't feel that way for me. It doesn't. She has, when the daughter is there, and it's very, very small part of this film.
It's like 3 scenes.
It's like 3 scenes. But I was perplexed by it because why even bother? Why give them a daughter? What's the reason? Because that's just a natural progression of life, and
maybe
like what? Why? Why is that daughter there?
Or maybe she felt like that was, I don't know. Maybe she felt like, oh, well, this is the natural progression. I can't have a career playing tennis, therefore I'll have a kid. And I mean, I don't know, but it's. That is kind of a head scratcher to a certain extent as to why the daughter's there. Just the fact that there's the scene where that him sleeping in the daughter's room is directly right after they have their little, if you don't win the Open tomorrow, I will leave you, and Tashi leaving and going, and then Art probably being like, oh, where's my wife? Oh, well, I guess I'll just go sleep with my daughter because at least that's somebody in my family who's here, who hasn't left the night before my before my number one match that I've had so far. So I don't know. That's the part. To me, it just seemed like, and the reason why I kind of like keep coming back to that obsession is the fact that she talks about when they were talking with her at the beach, and she was talking about playing tennis with that other competitor, and they were like, you kind of got animated. You said, let's go. Or no, come on. She said, come on, like at the end of one of the points. And she was like, yeah, there was like a very small period of time there where we were actually playing tennis.
Right.
And then that specific scene is mirrored perfectly at the end of the movie when that last point where they're going back and forth and he jumps over the net and his buddy catches him and then she jumps up and she says, "Come on." You know, it's like that was tennis. Like she's like living her whole life for those small moments, this pure love that she has, you know, that was and the fact that they ended the movie on that and it was just like done. That's it. You know, that was that to me, it was kind of like a statement. It was a button and it said that this is what she's looking for. She's looking for this. And also she's probably looking for, you know, these two guys in her life to reconcile too. Which maybe they did, you know, the fact that he, you know, grabbed him and was like, "Oh, I'm going to catch you and make it so that you don't fall and like bust your head open on the court." You know, that may have been the kind of like, the reconciliation that they were looking for, but that's their characters. I think her character to me seems like she's engaged. She is happy and engaged that she's been able to be there when true tennis was played. So
interesting.
Yeah.
I have a completely different
and it's just like the
end
end
scene.
Well, it's just like the end of Whiplash, where it's like that was a true that was true art that was created at the end by Miles Teller's character, and it wasn't done in the best way or the healthiest way, but it was true. It was the squeezing of all of the potential out of him at that exact moment, and so that's the end of Whiplash.
Well, we were talking off podcast about Black Swan and how we just both recently watched it. That's kind of the ending of that film too. That
she had to do what she had to do to get that out of herself.
Well, not only that, but I'm also fascinated by how movies, I've just started to realize this, and I've been watching movies how long? That they tell you everything you need to know usually in the first 5 minutes of the film. All films do it. Because in the beginning of the film, he describes Black Swan. He describes what Swan Lake is about.
Yeah.
And he pretty much tells you the whole plot of the movie, basically, of what's going to happen to her character. And then we're kind of shocked when it does. And did she do this herself or what's going on? It doesn't matter to her that her life is ending per se, or at least seemingly so, because we're not sure. But she reached a perfect moment in creating art. And as crazy it is to say, my brain goes, "Oh, I need and understand that need to have that perfect moment." All else doesn't matter, including life, which is really, I mean, that's just like lunacy if you think about it. Okay, so before we get back to the end, let's go through a couple of things in the middle. Did you have anything else you wanted to say? Because I think you're onto something, but and obsession and control obviously are
Similar,
cousins, relatives. So I agree with what you're saying about the obsession about things. And if you think about it, most movies are about obsession. Obviously, you have to, obsess about something, even if it's, National Treasure and it's the map, whatever. You're obsessed about finding
Men in Black.
that map.
They're obsessed about killing aliens.
Okay, prove me wrong, all in a very facetious, sarcastic way. I love it. So let's go back to like the middle part of the film, and I have some questions, and I think I've answered some of my questions myself, and I'm kind of proud about that on some level. But so my main question is this, and it might surprise people that this might be my main question. What is the need for the sexual obsession with the two men? What is the need in this film to have this kind of are they, aren't they, do they, don't they, have they, aren't, are they going to, have they not? What is this sexual desire or sexuality that they pull out of each other? One might say bisexuality, and I certainly don't want to erase anybody's sexuality by saying, well, if they were bisexual, then they probably would have hooked up. But are they bisexual? Because if they hook up, like I don't want to buy, it's called bi erasure. And I didn't even know it was a thing. But somebody explained, bisexuality exists, and we're always putting it off like, well, if you sleep with a man, then you're gay. If you sleep with a woman, you're straight. But if you sleep with both, it's because you're afraid of being one or the other. And that's pretty much erasing the fact that there's another sexuality called bisexuality. Anyway, so the point to all that is that I have no problem with those two good-looking men doing anything they did in the film and looking any way that they look, because they're beautiful men and I'm all about it. But I don't understand what that has to do with the narrative. I was trying to figure out after I saw the film, I mean, one might be frustrated that they never fulfill their destiny, or they never do what they need to do, or it's never a thing, or it's just a thing that, you know, they were into each other at one point, now they're into her. It's not that. It's always right on the precipice of just infatuation and intrigue more than it is about actually exploring one's possible bisexuality. And they're never like grossed out about it. And they're never like, oh, that's disgusting. Oh, what are you thinking? Oh, no. You know, I don't think they would have had any problem with proceeding with Tashi's character into a sexual encounter in the hotel room the night of the beach.
Yeah, but she wasn't interested in that.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Which is the best part of the scene.
Yeah.
Okay. That's just such the best part of the scene. And I love how much power she has in that scene. Whether or not she's utilizing it for good or bad is a whole nother question.
Yeah.
But my point is this: if it's part of the film, and it cannot not be titillating, because look at these good-looking people sweating all over the place. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. You have to give yourself permission to be a voyeur on some level, because we're all sexual beings and we're all like interested in different things. And I'm trying to be diplomatic about calling myself a pervert by saying that, not a pervert, but you know, like that's not the focus of this film.
Like,
obviously.
turns out we noticed what these people look like. Oh,
right.
okay.
Exactly. And man, they look good. And they're shot so beautifully. And all three of them are gorgeous people.
Yeah.
But the point is this: what does that do to facilitate the narrative? How does that push the narrative along? And then it came to me. Talk about opposite worlds, because we talked about my theory about seeing something in a film or a play or a song and or a concert and thinking that song's going to be great. And then the opposite happens. Another song's great, or another actor's great, blah, blah, blah. Well, we have had multiple films where there are two females and a male engaged in relationships or with each other. And when the two girls kiss, that seems like a natural progression to most people. They were like, oh, that, of course they're into each other. Yeah, they're hot. They're into each other. That happens all the time in movies. So why not the reverse? The two women in most of those films are not 100% necessarily sexually interested in each other, but in the moment, in the time, why not explore a different side of my sexuality? That happens all the time. Mm-hmm. So Luca Guadagnino just reversed that. But that doesn't answer the question of how their side interest pushes the narrative for me. It seems to block it on some kind of level. You could have taken all of that out. Now, I'm very careful about what I'm saying here. I know exactly what it's going to sound like. You could very easily take that out of the film and it not be an important part of the film, that they're in competition with each other about the female, about tennis, so forth and so on. So why do you think that's added into the film? Why do you think that's part of this movie?
Well, the first part of the movie is them winning a doubles, title, and then they play each other the next day. But when they win the doubles title together, like, that's something that they're sharing in together. And then I think that, you know, it's interesting because you talk about this all the time. You talk about boy finds girl, boy loses girl, boy finds girl again. Like, that's the trope. I mean, could we lay that onto this, but just with the two friends, or the two, maybe more than friends, friends find each other, they grow up together, and then they lose each other, and it happens to be because of Zendaya's character, and then maybe by the end they find each other again. How do you heighten a relationship? You know, you make it tangentially sexual, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I've answered my own question, and that's actually very helpful what you just said. I thought about the numerous heterosexual scenes where, or heterosexual erotic scenes where, you know, a woman is wearing whipped cream as a bathing suit.
Yeah.
Or, you know, speaking of cherries and sundaes, there's always a cherry and a twisting of the cherry stem. And, you know, the stuff that you see multiple times in films that happen to take place during with two women, and how two women can use a sexual encounter to entice a man, or entice somebody, or deflect something from somebody, or to just be into each other and let people know, hey, I'm into this too. And sometimes it's okay that you're just doing something because it's kind of hot. I have no problem with that. And I'm not saying I have any problem with this at all, because I don't. I don't. It's not in my nature to have any kind of issue with it. I just found it interesting that I was trying to rationalize and figure out how that part of the movie fit in to the rest of the narrative, when for so many decades I've just accepted two women,
the
or
other way
a
around.
woman, the other way around,
and how, or whatever it is. Yeah,
exactly. That's one of the first things that came to my mind. I mean, that's considered one of the most interesting scenes. That pool scene is considered one of the best kisses in movie history, and I get why, because it's obvious why. I mean, look at them. I mean, it's obvious. But, and in a way, that scene does push that narrative into a direction that the audience might not be ready to go into, not because of the sexuality, but because of this deceptive and deceitfulness of all of those characters and why they're doing what they're doing. So it does add to the narrative. My final conclusion, just as a topic to bring up at the podcast, was just to bring it up. My final conclusion is, it just is part of life. That sexual innuendo and sexuality that's unexpressed, or being able to be ironic and funny with a churro at the same time, is just part of life. And just because it's two guys doing it, and it's relatively new in films, not new, but
that's
relatively.
True, though. It's in mainstream films, it is relatively new.
Yeah. To the point where my mind just needs to adjust to the fact that this is just a color used in the film. This is just a blue they used instead of a red. That's it.
Speaking of the churro scene, the part that got me the most, or the part that I keyed in on the most, is that when they go to sit down, so they both obviously have churros, but when they go to sit down, the Patrick character, Josh O'Connor, he takes his foot and pulls the other chair before Art gets to sit down. He pulls the other chair closer to him, and I was like, that is a choice. And so that, and then he, you know, eats his churro, and then he eats the other guy's churro. And that is, obviously innuendo, but then it's just the fact that he's pulling that chair closer to him. That is a choice there. And I was like, that's the subtle filmmaking that this is the guy who did Suspiria. So he's not necessarily subtle all the time. But in a movie like Call Me by Your Name, he's super subtle, or he allows things to play out, or, you know, there's a lot of stuff that, he's not subtle in certain cases in Call Me by Your Name also, but there are a lot of scenes that are vibes scenes. But it's those types of choices where it's like, you know, even down to the blocking of the film, I can kind of see, that, like, there's a steady hand on the tiller in this movie. And even though it wasn't a quote unquote sports movie, I think it did have engaging scenes. And we haven't talked about the score at all. And it's Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. And it is a jammin' score. Like, it's fun to drive with. Like, it's good. And it's not the first time that they've worked together, because Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did Bones and All. Did you see Bones and All?
Not yet.
Oh.
I'm a little afraid of it.
I mean, if you like Mark Rylance, I mean, it's a great performance by Mark Rylance. It is an out there performance. He makes a choice and he goes for it. And you gotta respect that. But Timothy Chalamet is in it too, and he's fine. But Yeah, it is oh man, it's a crazy movie, but it's not as, I mean, there's some like gross out parts. There's some Suspiria style parts to it, but it's a lot less about that and a lot more about just like, yeah, I don't know. It's just a different, I'm sure there's allegories in there. I didn't think too much about it, but I'm sure there's allegories.
You could pretty much sum that up for every Luca Guadagnino film that we're talking about, all the way down. That's pretty. It's not about this, but it is about this, but it's not about that. And I'm sure there's allegories.
Yeah.
It's just going to take decades to try to decipher them on some level. But once again, I felt stuff and I was engaged in this film the whole entire time. So, so can we get back to the ending, or was there anything else that you wanted?
That's great.
Okay, so let's get back to the ending. So I was thinking about it because it's so unclear what happens. Is it my imagination? What? Do we? Who wins the match?
Oh yeah, Art wins the match. Mike Feist wins the match.
Okay.
Because he spikes the tennis ball and then he jumps into Josh O'Connor's arms.
But isn't he spiking the ball when he jumps into his arms?
Correct. He's spiking it, and instead of Josh O'Connor going after the ball and to try to defend, to try to volley the ball back to Mike Feist, he catches Mike Feist.
Okay.
But the big thing about that, like, I knew that the tell was gonna happen. I knew that him putting the ball in the little V part of the racket, I knew that was gonna happen, and like. And Guadagnino like draws that out so much, and I love it. It is just, it's like when you get like cheesy bread, and then like it like you stretch out that cheese, and the cheese just gets really, and you're like, how much farther can I stretch this before the cheese will just break? And the cheese never breaks; it just keeps going. And that was the part where I was just like, and I hoped that like everybody else in the theater was like on board with me before we saw that happen, before you actually see it, because I think once you see it, you're going to be like, oh yeah, that's the tell. But that's the best part about, movies, is where we all enter into this same movie, vocabulary. And once we get into that, like, you can kind of see things happen. The best is when you see something happen right before it happens, like when you know it's going to happen immediately before it happens, not too far. Because if you're like, oh, look, there's he's putting the ball in this particular location, I wonder if that's going to come back later. Like, that's kind of lame. And you're just kind of like, oh, it sucks that it's the Chekhov's gun of all of this stuff. And it's like, not everything's a Chekhov's gun, and not everything has to be a Chekhov's gun. But when there is a Chekhov's gun and it's not completely given away, that's nice to see that.
So in that last match, does Josh or just Patrick do the same thing, which is him admitting that he had the affair in the car? He does do that. Okay.
He does. And then that's when Art is essentially like, he just walks off. He gets the code violation or whatever, he cusses, and like, oh, you lose a point there. And then then they're like, the line judge is like, hey, you have to get ready for the other guy to serve to you. And he's like, no, let him serve. And he served. The reason why he's doing that is that the other, like, he was at match point, and then the other guy was gonna, Patrick was gonna let him win. But he knows Patrick is going to let him win, and he knows that Patrick slept with his wife. So then he's like, no, let him serve. So then he lets him serve to get the points, to get back to even, so that now whoever wins this next point wins the match. So, and then they were essentially even. Like, he's like, I'm not going to throw, Patrick says, I'm not going to throw this match. And Art says, like, I'm not going to let you screw my wife and, beat me. So that was the last point that was going back and forth, and they were really far back, and they were really close, and then all over the place. Yeah. That was
okay. Real quick side note. When he does that point of view of the ball, and that erratic
stuff. Rough. Yeah.
Okay. It's because it didn't happen sooner. If it had happened earlier in the film, and then when it first happens, it's kind of the middle of the film, so it's a bit jarring, because it is very exciting at the end when that does happen, when he finally really lets it go. Yeah. I liked that. I thought the ending was so undefined that I didn't know who won. I didn't know who she was screaming for. I didn't know who was happy at the end, and I kind of liked that. I kind of liked the fact that film has such a definitive end most of the time. This is the end. I mean, they even put words to it. This goes no further than right now.
Yeah.
In my mind, the film is still going on. Like, yeah.
So so what do you think about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? What do you think about the end of that? The end of that is when they're holed up in this in Bolivia or whatever, and then they run out, and then freeze frame.
Right, because not everybody wants to see those two good-looking men shot to death, first of all, and how ugly that would look. And third of all, it's great, epic ending because in your mind's eye, you think they're still alive, but obviously they're dead.
Okay,
it's like, there was a Saturday Night Live skit, I think it was. I don't remember, or maybe I can't remember. I know that there was a Saturday Night Live skit where they talked about Titanic 2 and they were like, but didn't the boat sink? And then there was a joke about Thelma and Louise Part 2.
Oh, God.
Which I actually think happened in real life, and Susan Sarandon was commenting on. They died.
Yeah.
And how much of a difference it was in the reaction to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid dying at the end of that film, and Thelma and Louise basically doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And people were in an uproar about it because two females would never do that. Blah, 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 blah. And they're like, welcome to the 90s.
Yeah.
We're going to change some stuff here. And that the irony that studio executives thought that there could be a part 2 because it was a multi-million-dollar making film but they're missing the point. So I'm not exactly sure why you're asking me that, because it's determined that they're going to die. Oh, I get it. So you're saying that then what happened at the end of this movie in my mind's eye?
Yeah. Did you think that? Yeah. I'm just wondering like what your initial.
So either way, one of them would have won the match.
Yes.
And you're saying that him hitting it over the way that he hit it over makes him win the match, but instead of Patrick going for the save or defending that shot, he holds on to his friend, letting his friend know that he will hold on to him for the rest of his life. And Zendaya is happy because she saw great tennis. Okay, I'm fine with all of that. When you said that about Zendaya earlier, I was like, yep, that solves that question, because I couldn't tell whether or not she was saying, come on, to the fact that her husband won, that was undefined who was the victor but it just now dawned on me there has to be somebody who won, because either way, if Mike missed the point or Art missed the point, I love how I keep referring to him like he's my friend, Mike Feist.
Yeah,
Like Mike, when Mike did that, next time I have tea, I'll tell him you said hello. Somebody had to have gotten the point. So somebody had to have won. But in my mind, I was thinking how smart it was to leave that not clearly defined. But you're saying it was, that the shot goes over and that she saw good tennis. Like I said, I'm good with all of that. That makes perfect sense.
I think. Now, I could be wrong. Now that we're going through this, like, I've not watched tennis in a long time. So either way, there was dynamic tennis, and then there was a choice that was, made that, because I don't know if you have to have like a match point and you have to have like win by 2 points, or I really don't know.
Yeah,
but
I don't
either
know
way, maybe the tennis match proper was not over at the end of the film, but it didn't matter because there was a sense of reconciliation or like each of the characters were served in the way that they wanted to be served, no pun intended. So maybe that was the case.
That's a pun intended.
Okay,
that's got to be a pun. Yeah.
I don't know that
so
now I'm backing away.
Now you're talking yourself out. You're talking yourself out of it back into what I said.
Once again, it doesn't matter who wins the match. The fact that there is a reconciliation between the two male characters, and that Tashi Duncan has seen, superb tennis, like that, which is what she lives for. That's my theory.
Okay,
so.
I fully am. I feel relieved on some kind of level, because I thought the indefinable moment of her going, come on, like, I wasn't sure why she was saying that at first. Like, I wasn't sure that, I mean, you're right though. I think that you're right, because she saw great tennis and that's all that really matters to her. This interpersonal relationship is side note, blah, 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 blah. I just like the fact that it was really not defined clearly who's the winner and why she's yelling, and that's life.
Yeah. That
life continues, and that it doesn't have the end at it, that there are ongoing chapters, and that they will have a relationship, and they will be a part of each other's life. I mean, maybe not, but it's fascinating to me, more fascinating to me, that two people who see a lot of movies have almost two completely different takes on the end of a movie, but yet can see each other's common ground and figure out how what you said was how you saw it. I can now put on top of what I saw and understand it in a different way. And I love that I have you questioning what your definitive answer was. I love that.
Wow. I just don't know exactly. I can't remember how tennis ends.
Right.
Yeah. Either way.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. It's a movie that I'm not sure, when people ask me, how did I feel about it? My answer is going to be, I think you need to see it. Go and see it. Because I don't think you can give a description. And I really don't like when people do that anyway, when they tell me their opinions about stuff that's not going to influence necessarily whether or not I see something or not.
Yeah.
I'm going to see it regardless. But I definitely think it's a movie that people need to go and see, because I don't know if they're expecting what you're getting. You're not getting what I think the movie set up to give you. They're thinking it's a throuple tennis movie, and it is, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's something more than that.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast. I'll see you next time.